Are your existing solutions able to take advantage of real threat intelligence? Common solutions like firewalls weren't designed to handle the massive and growing volume of threat indicators. This challenge often results in significant gaps in your protections, even when you think you have it covered. You need to protect yourself by filtering network traffic against unique threat indicators in a way that allows you to act. Polywall by Bandora Systems is the solution that filters over 10 million indicators right out of the box. Developed in partnership with the Department of Defense, Polywall is affordable for companies of all sizes. Get your free trial today at bandorasystems.com. Rapid7 powers the practice of SecOps. Using shared data, analytics, and automated workflows, SecOps unites IT, DevOps, and security teams to make security an outcome of innovation. Rapid7 combines technology, expertise, and advocacy to drive vulnerability management, application security, incident detection, and log management for more than 7,000 organizations worldwide. Power up your SecOps practice with a free trial at rapid7.com/securityweekly. Skeleton keys, golden tickets, forged packs, DC Sync, DC Shadow. The Active Directory attack surface is expanding faster than admins can keep up with. Securing your environment begins with implementing least privilege administrative models, but does not end there. Many organizations send Active Directory syslog events to a SIM platform. However, logs are noisy, of limited scope, and are time-consuming to review and act upon. Active Directory is secure when it's clean, understood, configured properly, monitored closely, and controlled tightly. StealthBits technologies provide solutions that monitor, secure, and detect the latest threats against Active Directory. Visit them today at stealthbits.com to learn more. We are here, and today we're actually at DEF CON. Which is awesome. I'm here with Matt Alderman.
My first DEF CON.
It's your first one, huh?
DEF CON 26, my first one.
I have to say, it's not your typical DEF CON experience. There's no line for the men's room in the pool area out here, which was kind of weird to me.
Nope, and if we get too hot, we just go jump in the pool.
We can go jump in the pool. It's good.
Yeah.
So we did Black Hat the past 2 days. Actually, this morning we were talking with a lot of people about the industry and various vendors in our process. And I think that's where I was telling Matt earlier, that's where I want to start. I don't necessarily know where we'll air these segments. They'll be across our enterprise style shows, Paul Security Weekly, Enterprise Security Weekly, Business Security Weekly, and Application Security Weekly.
Right.
Is where we'll run all of these segments. But I wanted to talk about the process first. It was really kind of an eye-opening experience to me to come to the first time to these conferences and actually take formal briefings as an analyst. And I think for the first time in Security Weekly history, we're really, truly taking on that role and formalizing it, and it's been very well received, which is exciting for me.
Yeah, you and I started this a little bit last year when you asked me to come join you at Black Hat. And as you know, I have this process that we've talked a lot about on the different shows. And so I used that process, and we did a few interviews last year, kind of debriefed on those. But this year,
John Strand and I did Enterprise Security Weekly. We started that, and we started getting more into the vendor space. You and I worked at Tenable. We were evaluating a lot of vendors in the strategy group at Tenable. So this is all come to this point where we're formalizing the process.
Where we can formalize the process and do what? We did almost 30 briefings in 2 days at Black Hat, which was great, but a little crazy. But we have similar approaches, both of our questionnaires, and so now we can actually compare notes and talk about different vendors and what we're seeing on the floor.
Sure.
So it's great, I think.
So we had some different activities. We did formal briefings with vendors that we selected. They came to our pool Cabana. We sat with typically the founder of the company and just learned about what problem they solve, the solutions, the marketplace that they're in, the market or category they're in, who their competition is, and it was great. Then we did paid interviews, and you'll see those be posted to our YouTube channel. We might use some of those on our shows as well. And that was really more focused on the questions that we ask at the booth, right? And we really went through, like, what problem do you solve? Like, why do people want to buy it, basically? Like, if I've got a problem, which problem do I have that you solve, right? And those have been really great. The HP interview was awesome, too. That was a little more high level. But I spoke to 2 senior consultants that are consulting with enterprises, and they're like, how do we get a handle on our endpoints, right? And by endpoints, they meant everything that's plugged into the network.
Right.
So that was a little different because HP is such a large company. It was a little more focused on that aspect of it. Doug's been doing some trivia style interviews. I think that's something we'll have to kind of ramp up
Yeah.
Next year, make more of a game show out of, I think, to make it a little more engaging,
Yeah,
right?
maybe more prizes or something. Make it a little, maybe scoreboards or leaderboards or something.
Right.
Yeah, kind of gamify it a little more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we spent some time on the floor. Now, I wish we had more time to spend on the floor.
Not much this year compared to last year.
The floor was huge this year. How was it compared to RSA, Matt?
Well, I mean, RSA was nuts in the U.S., as you know, the 2 show floors and all the Moscone stuff. But this show, Black Hat's continuing to grow. I mean, the business hall was gigantic. The Innovation City area and Arsenal's growing. You had vendors in the hallway between the 2. So you're definitely seeing growth here. I was in RSA Singapore, APJ, 2 weeks ago. There, I think it's shrinking a little bit. Maybe not the same adoption in the Asia-Pacific region, but it looks smaller to me. But Black Hat's definitely bigger from last year.
Now, what's interesting is when you ask the question of what problem you solve, did you find that when you talk to a CEO and founder, like they get it, dude, right? Like they're much better, obviously, at answering that question.
And kind of the vision behind the company, right? They're the entrepreneur. They saw a problem, and then they had a vision on how they wanted to solve it.
Yeah.
So you're going to get much more crisp, clear answers to those questions from the founders themselves, versus maybe some of the people at the booth.
Sure.
It may not have that same. It may not have kind of a articulated,
I found
down.
You had to get deeper into the questioning to get to the problem.
Yeah.
Whereas the CEO and founder, you get right there, right in the beginning.
Right.
And then in the booth, you ask what problem. They basically talk about the solution. So then I ask them how the solution's deployed and like what it does. And then I say, okay, like what are your customers telling you is success? Or what do your customers come back and say, I'm so glad you helped me with this.
Right.
And then you get to the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that value driver should link back to the problem.
Right.
And how you solve it uniquely or better. So yes, it takes sometimes a little longer with the staff to get to that answer. But the founders, they get it, right? They saw it somewhere along the way. So I think
and that's what's interesting about Innovation City, where I recommend folks spend some time at any conference, because typically the founders are there in the booth.
Yeah, it's really hard on the main business floor to have the founders there. I know
even senior marketing or product people, it's hard.
I agree. I mean,
I didn't see Corey at the Tenable booth.
No, but Renaud and Amit were both here, but I didn't see him at the booth when I was there.
They're meeting with customers.
They're meeting with customers, probably in a suite. I didn't see Philippe at the Qualys booth, but Sumed was there. He did one session there, but then I didn't see him the rest of the time. So it's hard to get the founders in the business hall.
Unless you schedule briefings like we did.
True.
And that was one of the values I found is rather than working the show floor, I could request now, as Security Weekly, that we meet with the founders.
Right.
Which, I mean, that's big.
And bringing them over and having a place where we can meet, or even at their place, one-on-one, away from the show
I think
floor,
almost all the briefings we did. Well, I forgot to do one briefing that I requested. Sorry about that. We're going to schedule that for afterwards as well. But so, I mean, so what triggers, like, what's your criteria, Matt, for saying out of the 300 plus vendors that are here, which one, why do you want to talk to a particular one?
Yeah, I have this philosophy on where the security market goes, right? A lot of the work that we did at Tenable, kind of where the industry trends are going. There's 3 spaces I love to learn about. I love the application security space.
Sure.
As the application evolves and containerization and microservices and all this crazy technology stuff that's going on there.
You were way ahead of the container market too, because I remember you talking to me at Tenable about
we
a couple
were doing
things.
This late 15.
SIM in the cloud, and then you were like containers, and I'm like, when did you first start mentioning containers to me? 2015.
2015.
And I was like, what the hell's a container?
Yeah.
Like, what's Docker?
Yeah.
And I think there's still a lot of people with those questions. Because it hasn't been like an explosion growth that we've seen in certain other areas.
Right.
It's been slow.
It's been slow, and in the container world, the dev guys are doing it. Security doesn't necessarily know until the projects come to production, and then security's like, oh my gosh, how do I deal with this stuff? But yeah, so that whole AppSec space is really interesting to me. I love the identity space. The user still matters, right? You're giving users access to these applications. Some of them are customers. Some of them, obviously employees. You have developers that you need to give access to deploy these applications. So the whole identity user space is I think this evolving space is going to go through a lot of transformation.
It's weird how things evolve, like identity and how that ties into NAC and how that ties into IoT and all of the pivots and integrations between those companies.
Yeah.
Which really just comes down to, I got to know what devices are on my network, and I got to know the users that are on my network, and then I got to observe the behavior of both.
Right.
I mean, that's really kind of a main theme that I would say I picked up from this conference was exactly that.
And you're going to see even more of that because the number of dimensions with IoT, industrial IoT, they're just expanding the number of connections that have to be monitored and understood.
What I realize that I believe it's fueling, Matt, is this quest to know everything that's on my network. What was interesting is when we were at Tenable, we'd preach that, and people were like, yeah, there's no way I could figure that out. Or like, I don't even want to know about everything on my network because then I got to fix what I find, and I can't fix what I have today. Never mind that 5 or 10 or 15% I don't know about, right?
Exactly.
But I think the tides have shifted, and the technology's gotten better. Like, we can take full snapshots of the internet now.
Yeah.
Like, the technology's gotten better from external and internal, I think, to get a better understanding of where your assets are, because they're all over the place today. They're in the cloud, they're in containers, they're in mobile devices, and I think we're finally catching up. We've, I think, identified this as a gap for a long time. I would say this conference for me was one where I think we're closing in on that gap to have solutions. I'm not saying people are implementing, but have solutions to track assets.
And parts of them, right? There's a bunch of integration, interconnectivity that's going to have to happen across these. I think we're still very point security focused. And then that third component I always look at is the data side, right? At the end of the day, we're trying to protect data. I actually didn't do any, I don't think I did any data briefings this time. I'm curious to see where some of these data security companies go into the future. So it's a space I definitely want to continue to look at. This time I also spent some time with the industrial control folks. You know, you've heard these trends around IT and OT. What does that really mean? Can you actually bridge IT and OT? They're really different. And so I spent some time with a few of the OT vendors here that are kind of carving out a name for themselves in the space. So that was an interesting area, but I have to narrow it down. I'm not interviewing the networking guys. I'm not interviewing the firewalling guys, even the endpoint guys. You know, we kind of know where that market is right now. And so
there's so many aspects of that endpoint market too. There's some companies doing some really innovative things, but you wonder how much traction they're going to gain in such a flooded market.
Yeah, it's tough. How do you differentiate Symantec and McAfee and Cylance and CrowdStrike and Tanium and SentinelOne and I mean the list just keeps going on and on and on. And look, Symantec and McAfee got put on notice a number of years ago when the Cylances and the Taniums and even CrowdStrike a little later came out and really put pressure on the AV vendors at the endpoint side. And you saw this big explosion of endpoint companies. Only so many are going to win this space.
But
right?
I think it forced the larger players to be more innovative.
It did. And you've seen Symantec and McAfee making major improvements.
The feedback we got on a segment we did with John Strand, where John was like, look, a lot of people are struggling with this problem, and that is, do I keep my McAfee in Symantec, or do I replace that, rip and replace with a newer vendor like a Cylance, CrowdStrike, or any of the endgame? And what John said is you're not necessarily doing it every time. He says the larger players maybe get you like 80% of the way there. And he's like, you do other things to cover that 20%, it's not worth ripping, replacing in every instance. And the feedback we got on John's advice, which is the same advice I've been giving to enterprise clients for a while, was really, they're like, thank you. Like, that really helped us ground ourselves and to go, you know, for that 20% gain, are we going to rip and replace an endpoint solution on 100,000 endpoints?
Yeah.
Because that's no short order.
No. The work to migrate those solutions is no small feat.
And then the training on how to manage it that goes across multiple groups. Right. And then it doesn't impact the user because now I've got this new technology. It has to be tuned. Right. It's a slow rollout. There's a lot of work. The benefit has to be there.
There is a level of stickiness. With the existing players, and you really have to justify why you rip and replace and go through the migration and go through all that work to do it.
I mean, at some organizations, I think most organizations are going to want to have one solution to manage on their endpoint for that protection and detection of malware, right? Like, but what I see some people doing, to John's point, is well, for this group of people, we're going to use a Cylance, and then for these groups, we're going to stick with Symantec, and kind of slowly doing that on a department by department basis. However, now you're managing 2 endpoint solutions rather than 1. And the devil's in the configuration. The pen testers I talk to are like, look, a lot of these products work really well, but we bypass them almost 100% of the time. Then we'll go back and we work with the organization and the vendor, and they go, oh, you need to enable this feature or configure it this way. That's why you see MSSPs getting involved in the endpoint market, because they can help you with a carbon black that requires that configuration. And when you configure it right, pen testers are like, yeah, this can be problematic. The problem is no one really configures it right because it's too hard.
So that's why you're seeing all these managed detection response offerings now, because now they're starting to take the endpoint detection response, wrap a managed service around it to manage it on behalf of the customer, so it's configured correctly. And
and I also think you're seeing a lot of messaging in the space on ease of use and deployment, which is something that I think, being a newer industry in cybersecurity, that a lot of vendors hadn't focused on. Because I think their audiences were primarily engineers and nerds, like us, And we're like, yeah, we could write a query string, and we want to dig into it and really write the advanced queries. The problem today is, also a conversation John and I had, was you've got maybe one expert on every organization. You got one ninja. I mean, maybe some have multiple, but they're in short order. You need solutions that the expert can look at, do the initial deployment configuration, then pass off to the help desk, your SOC team, your operations, your developers, and say, okay, now it's a tool that helps you in your workflow. It helps you do your job better and doesn't require that senior person with 20 or 30 years in experience. I mean, let's be frank, there's not too many people with 20 years of experience in our industry today, because it hasn't been around that long. So that's another trend I'm seeing, is that the vendors that are successful oftentimes don't even have the best tech, but they've got the easiest deployment and the easiest of ease of use across the product, different vendors, and therefore they're winning.
I mean, this was Qualys's model way back in the day, I mean, Philippe was a pioneer in delivering a service from the cloud, but it was all the operational ease. You didn't have to install a management console. You didn't have to worry about updating it, upgrading it, maintaining it. It was all done for you in the cloud, And so ease of use, that operational ease, was a huge benefit to Qualys in the early days, the Qualys customers. And so now when you think about, okay, what happens in that market, is, well, do you want to manage all that stuff? Do you want to do that yourself? Are you going to go hire those people, or are you just going to keep leveraging a cloud solution? So I think it is a very important part. It's what allowed them to succeed in getting the solution deployed very quickly and very easily. Literally, you deploy a scanner, link it to the cloud environment, put in an IP range, and you're off and running.
And I think Tenable has caught up largely with Tenable.io, which you were involved in. I saw some of the, I was kind of departing as we were having early conversations on that, but it was good to see that come to fruition, and I think it's very much that ease of use and deployment model that have it in the cloud.
That's the future of where these technologies
now, Rapid7's kind of interesting in that I think they've pivoted in a different direction, and targeting the mid-market SMB small enterprise and offering services. And that's where they carved out their niche.
They cover that horizontal stack now.
And I think that's an awesome play for them. Rather than try and compete on the cloud with Tenable and Qualys, they pivot into a different direction, which I really like.
But Insight VM is their cloud version, and people seem
and so they're
to
making
like
inroads in that too. But it's been a different play for Rapid7. But I like their
all three strategies are really different right now.
When enterprises come to us, you're like, you could actually use Rapid7 and be very effective with that. Like, you don't necessarily need this other vendor. So we're finding what I think I found in this conference too, this summer camp, is different strokes for different folks, I think they're all category kings, certainly. But in our industry, Matt, what's interesting is the different solutions work better for different clients, And they'll find their matches. And I'm almost seeing like a multiple category king in a lot of the categories in security, Because they're winning with customers that need that style of solution for whatever reason. And there's a lot of factors that go into, could be industry, could be healthcare versus finance, could be
deployment style,
deployment, maturity, cloud on-prem. Exactly. All those things play into it, which is exciting for us because we have more vendors to talk about and more solutions to talk about than ever before. which is good for us because that's what we do is we talk about stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
We talk about all these things.
And we get to play around with some of the solutions too, which is really cool.
Right. Yeah.
And compare those to open source, and I've got some cool stories on that.
Yeah.
On that front as we dig into it.
Yeah, we actually did an interview segment on an open source component that will hopefully get out on one of the other shows. But you're seeing, how people are taking open source, using them to solve problems in the enterprise without actually a commercial product behind it yet. So there's some
it's interesting that we came up with like a list of almost a dozen vendors that they're not sponsors today. They're not someone we were taking a formal briefing with. They're not someone that was doing a paid interview. They're not someone that we were already talking to find that fit between our Security Weekly audience and the community and their solution. There's a number of vendors that we're talking to that we think are a really good fit, right? And we're working with them already. So we took all of those out. I think we ended up with 90 or so companies. Yeah. Then we went through that list, and we're like, all right, realistically, what are the dozen out of that 90 that each of us can go visit?
Right.
I think out of that list, I maybe hit 8 of them. I didn't hit all of them.
I think I hit 3.
Yeah.
Just because it was so crazy.
But there were, I don't want to say diamonds in the rough, but after like eliminating all those factors, some of the ones I met with were really impressive. And
names you've never heard.
Never heard of.
People are like, who's that?
Never
right?
heard
I mean,
of.
they're new companies that are just starting out.
Yeah. So which, and we'll talk more in detail about them, but like if you had to have your pick, what would be your pick of a company we've never heard of that really impressed you? What's your like A for the day in the company you met with?
Gosh.
Like whether it was a briefing, a paid briefing, or all the vendors we've probably talked to almost 100 vendors between the two of us in the past couple of days.
Yeah, so all the briefing folks I knew, and I wanted to get more, so I can't say they're a diamond in the rough. Probably the one that I found was a company called Devo, D-E-V-O. We
haven't even talked about that one yet.
They're out of Madrid, Spain, and they're really trying to address log data at scale. What they say is, we're gonna, we're the Splunk killer. The way
there's a lot of Splunk killers on the market today.
Yeah,
sure.
But their approach was interesting. I didn't get in as deep as I wanted to, but what they're trying to do is take raw log data, embed some meta index data with it, compress it, but not have to decompress it or re-index it or anything else. So there appears to be some interesting technology behind what they do.
It's interesting.
Collect a lot of log, bring it down and compress it, but make it instantly available.
And not to massage it again. Like in manufacturing, you say you want to touch that part once, implement it in that process once, and then move on. You never want to have to go back and readjust it again. It sounds like a similar concept.
Yeah, similar concept. So I had no idea these guys were out there. I had some former RSA folks go over, and I ran into them over on the show floor, and it kind of gave me a high-level overview, and I was like, well, that seems pretty cool. I don't think anybody's heard of Devo.
Now, when I went through the list, I found this one company, and I was like, I really want to meet with them. And it ended up being my A for the day, and they're a startup out of Portugal, which is kind of funny. Yours was out of Madrid, Spain.
Same out of Portugal.
Same geographic region, right?
The Iberian Peninsula is innovating,
right?
Folks. Yeah.
And so their company is called JScrambler, and they obfuscate your JavaScript in your custom application so that people can't steal your intellectual property, and they also can't copy it and run it somewhere else, which means they can't steal it to use it, which also means they can't clone your site and try and do a phishing attack. So they had two, and again, they were my A for the day because they were just awesome all around. They were firing on all cylinders. But their value became very apparent to me very quickly and easily. Like, those are two awesome problems to solve right there. And then we got into, and we'll talk about them more later when we talk about web app stuff, like the way they've structured their company, their pricing and all that stuff. Right. I was very, very impressed. And so they were my number one pick for the show, hands down.
We just picked 2 Iberian Peninsula companies.
And 2 that, like when I mentioned the companies to other people, they're like, I've never heard of them before.
Right. That's exactly the point. And that's why when you walk into these places, go to the Innovation City or go to the
Was
back.
yours an Innovation
or go to the
City?
city.
What was your
No,
company?
a Devo. They were actually in the
Devo.
main business hall. They were
Okay.
just in the back.
Okay.
So you got to get through.
They had a small, I always go right to the back where all the
you
small
gotta-
booths are
You got to go
first,
down
yep.
the sides and to the back because that's where all the new guys are, and that's
Yeah.
where I want to spend my time.
Yes.
I know the Qualisuses and the Tenables and the IBMs and the Rapid
Sure.
7s, right? But they're all in the front. You got to get to the sides and you got to
Yeah.
get to the back. And Devo was back towards the back, so that's where they were. They actually had a really good sized booth for a company that's
Nice.
pretty new.
Yeah.
But yeah, all the really cool stuff's in the back.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's, that was our approach. Hopefully we help people with our questionnaire that we were giving out. Hopefully people use that. If you used our questionnaire, let us know how it worked for you. Send us email, psw@securityweekly.com. Let us know how it worked out.
Yeah.
If you've got questions about, maybe you stopped by a vendor, or maybe you didn't go to Black Hat and you're like, hey, who did you guys think was good for this? Let us know, and we'll help you out.
Yeah, and any improvements to the questionnaire, we love it.
Yes,
the other thing
this was a beta version.
Yeah. And the other thing I heard is they're like, could you take some of that criteria and use it for evaluation purposes? So one of the things we should think about is how do we turn some of this into potentially an evaluation criteria for an RFP or something like that. So I think there's some ways this could expand eventually, but this is these questionnaires literally take 20 to 25 minutes typically to get through. It's a good chunk of data in a good amount of time to really understand what the company's doing.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, that's kind of the introductory segment that we wanted to get through. Now we're going to dig into next, and you'll see this air on various shows, into some specific categories and talk in depth about some of the companies that we met with. So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Thank you for watching this interview from Las Vegas. If you want to watch and learn more, go to securityweekly.com/summercamp18 or go to our YouTube channel Security Weekly to view the playlist.